Hey everyone, this is Derrick Broze with the Conscious Resistance Network, and welcome to another episode of the Conscious Resistance, where today we'll be discussing Venezuela, drugs, oil, and of course, the big picture that most people are missing, technocracy. About a week ago, as I'm recording this on Sunday afternoon, the U.S. government under Donald Trump invaded Venezuela and kidnapped their president, Nicolás Maduro. Of course, this report is not a defense of him or denial that some Venezuelans are celebrating this action. Largely, it seems people outside of the country and, of course, some people within the country. But despite the celebrations by Americans and some Venezuelans, the fact remains that this effort is a part of a much bigger picture. For one, it is a clear sign that the U.S. empire is just out in the open now. Whereas under past presidencies, including under Donald Trump's previous term, for the most part, the empire was hidden under this veneer, this facade of legitimacy. You know, let's think of Obama, the first black president, constitutional attorney who's well-spoken and gives this veneer to the authoritarianism that the United States government uses, but is able to do so in a way that is respectable and is, as I said, well-spoken. And so most people either ignore or turn a blind eye to the authoritarianism that happened under Trump and under Obama and previous presidents. But with Trump, the mask has completely come off. And now with what Trump is calling the Monroe Doctrine, which is, of course, a throwback to the Monroe Doctrine, which was existing in the 1800s, and basically said that any conflict that happened in the Western Hemisphere, the United States would be involved. Now that we've reached that point, it is just out in the open. They're admitting that they are that colonization is still alive, colonialism is still alive, empire is still alive, and the U.S. government saying, for example, Trump aide Stephen Miller saying, we're going to do whatever we want. We have the power and we live in the real world and we can do whatever we want. Who's going to stop us, right? And so the empire is now out in the open, but it's not just about oil, although it is about oil, and it's not just about drugs, although it's partially about drugs, and it's not only about empire. It is about marching us forward towards this technocratic state that I've been warning about since at least 2019 and 2020. We're going to talk about all of that and more today on The Conscious Resistance, so please stay tuned.
This is Derrick Broze. This is Derrick Broze of The Conscious Resistance. I'm here in Standing Rock.
That man is wanted in 5 different countries: Chile, Argentina, Brazil.
We've been fighting a long time, and we've all lost so very much. So many loved ones gone. You are not alone. There are pockets of resistance all around the planet. We are at the brink. Above all, stay alive. You have no idea how important you are. If you're listening to this, you are the resistance.
All right, so let's go ahead and jump into it. Guys, I want to remind you, as always, I write weekly articles for The Last American Vagabond. And if you haven't visited thelastamericanvagabond.com in a while, you need to, because Ryan is constantly doing daily breakdowns, sometimes 3 or 4 hours long if you've got the time and the bandwidth for it, but doing one of the best jobs of breaking down the daily propaganda of all the situations going on in our world right now. I'm just going to talk about Venezuela, but if you want more insight into what's going on in the world, I encourage you to visit thelastamericanvagabond.com. And of course, if you ever want to see my articles, you can go to the website. You see where it says TLAV team. Check out my name, Derrick Broze. This is a list of all the investigations I've done over the years. These are articles that are 2, 3, 4 parts. If you will just click on my name, it'll take you to this page, and you can see all of my recent articles, including articles about Trump and the FCC under Trump trying to take away local power for the 5G rollout, Epstein colleague Les Wexner and some information on him being back in the news, Mexico's biometric ID, developing news around that, and of course my new article, the Venezuela Technocracy Connection, which we're going to cover today. So as I said, about a week ago on January 3rd in the early morning hours, the United States went in, they grabbed Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores, and they transported them to New York City. They're now being charged with gun crimes and cocaine trafficking. And I think there's more at play than what we're really being told. So let's look at the drug claims. You know, was this really about drug trafficking? First of all, one important point to note is that in May 2025, that is under Donald Trump's administration, the U.S. the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration released their National Drug Threat Assessment, the NDTA. Right here, you can see it. There's the press release for it, and you can actually download the entire report here. You can see everything that you need to there. This report mentions Venezuela trafficking fentanyl to the U.S. a total of 0 times. Instead, it blames Mexican cartels for the manufacturing and trafficking of fentanyl, which is a pretty widely known fact that it's mostly coming through Mexico, products made from China, etc., and that it's making its way through the United States. Venezuela has never been connected to fentanyl trafficking, which is why the indictment against Maduro doesn't mention fentanyl. In fact, now they've switched to cocaine trafficking. Another key point here is that although Trump and neocon Secretary of State Marco Rubio have repeatedly sought to tie Maduro to drug cartels, there remains very little evidence of such a claim. The U.S. government has claimed that he's the head of the drug trafficking group Cartel de los Soles, Cartel of the Suns. However, many of the skeptics of this claim say that the group doesn't actually exist. And during Trump's first term, Maduro was indicted as the alleged leader of this cartel. And so one point about that, one note on that I find interesting is if you listen to the rhetoric from the Trump administration, you're like, particularly Maduro, Stephen Miller, you're going to see them say, this guy was indicted. He was a known head of a terrorist organization, a cartel. He was indicted by the U.S. government, as if that's supposed to carry some weight. But it came from Trump's first administration. So you could basically just say his first term, they indicted him to set him up to where things are now, where they could come in and arrest him. So it's not like a big, like, oh, we indicted him, guys. That's supposed to mean something, when it's clear that this is what they wanted all along. So that doesn't really, it's not a big point for me. Yes, he was indicted because you guys indicted him, because you wanted to be able to say he's indicted so you can go after him. However, when Maduro was brought to New York City and officially charged, the U.S. Department of Justice did not mention these claims of him being the head of a foreign terrorist organization. They did not charge him with that. And it's because more than likely they know that there's not strong enough evidence to convict him in court of this. Instead, they are now claiming he was involved in cocaine trafficking and, as I said, gun trafficking, gun weapons charges. So that is an interesting point to know, that the claims of drug trafficking, they don't even stand up. And yeah, some people could say, okay, well, maybe there are, we'll see in court, right? Maybe there is proof that he is connected to cocaine trafficking. Well, we'll wait and see how that goes. But either way, sure, cocaine's bad. Cocaine's been around a long time. Most of it's coming from Colombia, actually. But it is not the scourge that fentanyl is. Fentanyl, according to numbers, has killed 300,000 Americans over the number of years. And, many people want something to be done about it. I don't think going in and invading Venezuela is the answer, but either way, that's the justification that they have been saying. So if that's not the case, if it's not about fentanyl, instead they're talking about cocaine, which is not killing 300,000 Americans or even 100,000 Americans, then what is this really about? So I don't think the drug charges are enough. There's something more going on here. And so despite that, when Trump held a press conference on last Saturday morning after this, he made it very clear that this is all about oil. And he doesn't even hide it. He says that the U.S. government's interest lies in gaining control over Venezuela's oil industry. And so I tweeted about this and I put this video. We're going to watch this video. I'm not going to play the whole thing because you'll get the point after just a moment. But check this out real quick. This is Donald Trump in his own words saying that this is about oil.
As everyone knows, the oil business in Venezuela has been a bust, a total bust, for a long period of time. They were pumping almost nothing by comparison to what they could have been pumping and what could have taken place. We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country. In addition, Venezuela unilaterally seized and sold American oil, American assets, and American platforms, costing us billions and billions of dollars. They did this a while ago, but we never had a president that did anything about it. They took all of our property. It was our property. We built it. And we never had a president that decided to do anything about it. Instead, they fought wars that were 10,000 miles away. We built Venezuela oil industry with American talent, drive, and skill. And the socialist regime stole it from us during those previous administrations, and they stole it through force. This constituted one of the largest thefts of American property in the history of our country. Considered the largest theft of property in the history of our country. Massive oil infrastructure was taken like we were babies, so we didn't do anything about it. I would have done something about it. America will never allow foreign powers to rob our people of.
All right. Okay. So you guys get the point there. Like I said, he's making it clear this is about oil. He's not hiding it by any stretch of the imagination. He just goes on from there. And I honestly we don't need to hear him repeat himself. He says here, we're going to have our very large U.S. oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for our country. Now, a little bit of background, because he's talking about how they took our oil. Venezuela, they nationalized oil projects in 2007, seizing assets from ExxonMobil, ConocoPhillips, after they did not want to accept the terms that the state-owned PDVSA was offering, which is basically saying, let us be in control and you guys can still have oil here. They didn't want to accept it. But then Total, Chevron, State Oil, now Equinor, and BP agreed to the restructuring and retained minority stakes in their Venezuelan projects. So some companies chose to stay, some didn't. But Trump is claiming that these were a theft of American oil and that part of the U.S. presence in Venezuela will be to take this oil. So as I said, he says this is one of the largest thefts of American property in history. Now, I just want to take a moment there. Another side note here that I really can't stand this sort of collectivist mindset. Maybe some of you think this is an irrelevant point, but this idea that because some American company had oil, that it's our oil, as in the United States oil, American oil. It's my oil. I see people on social media saying, Derrick, they took our oil. Did you start the oil company? Did you put the infrastructure together? Did you take it out of the ground? No, then it's not your oil. Let go of this freaking collectivist mindset that you're the government or that you're America. We bombed them. We did this. No, if it's not you, then stop personalizing it. Stop collectivizing it. And instead say this company, they built some infrastructure to get oil out of the ground. At best, you could say they were stolen from, but that's not the American people. That's not us. And there's no evidence that anything that is good for these companies is automatically going to be good for the American people. So stop listening to garbage like that from Trump. So whenever Trump was pushed about this, because he said that the U.S. is going to be running Venezuela. In fact, let's just go play another quick clip here. This is just more examples of Trump and his team saying they're going to be running things, in case there's any question in your mind yet.
We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. So we don't want to be involved with having somebody else get in, and we have the same situation that we had for the last long period of years. So we are going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. And it has to be judicious because that's what we're all about. We're going to run the country right. It's going to run very judiciously, very fairly. It's going to make a lot of money. We're going to give money to the people. We're going to reimburse people that were taken advantage of. We're going to take care of everybody. It's very important.
So he says they're going to reimburse people that were taken advantage of. He's not talking about the American people or the Venezuelan people. He's talking about the oil companies. And so he even says this whenever they pushed him a little bit about, what do you mean about running things? He says, well, we're going to be running it with a group and we're going to make sure it's run properly. We're going to rebuild the oil infrastructure, which will cost billions of dollars, and it'll be paid for by the oil companies directly. That's what he's claiming. Now, of course, Trump did just meet this week, I believe on Thursday, with some of the oil executives, and most of them, one of them said it's uninvestable in Venezuela. There's too many variables. They don't know if they even want to get back in the country, despite what Trump is claiming. But then later on, Trump appeared to suggest that U.S. taxpayers would subsidize the oil companies, which means they'll take your money and they will reimburse the oil companies for any money they have to spend to rebuild infrastructure. Trump said, quote, they will be reimbursed for what they're doing, but that's going to be paid. And we're going to get the oil flowing the way it should be. And then on Monday, just last week, interview with NBC News, Trump said a similar thing. Quote, I think we can do it in less time than that, but it'll be a lot of money. A tremendous amount of money will have to be spent, and the oil companies will spend it, and then they'll get reimbursed by us or through revenue. Who's us? That's the U.S. taxpayers. With Trump admitting that a major motivation for taking out Maduro was to benefit oil companies, it's worth asking who actually owns these oil companies. So 3 of the companies, Chevron, ExxonMobil, and ConocoPhillips, were involved in the oil sector during and before the nationalization under Hugo Chavez and during the U.S. sanctions era. Well, guess what? BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street are the majority institutional shareholders of all three companies, typically controlling around 20 to 25% of the shares in each, with BlackRock and Vanguard often holding the largest stakes among these institutions. So BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, they have about a fifth to a quarter of these companies. I don't want to say they control them, but they have the controlling interest. That is, I think, worth noting that these companies, which go back to BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, the big three institutional investment firms, that they hold quite a bit of money there. And so they might stand to benefit from what Trump's doing here for the oil companies, even though, as I said, some of the current oil executives are saying it's not very good investment. It's going to take too much money. So they may or may not be interested in it. But if they are interested, you'd better believe BlackRock is going to benefit. And who's at the head of BlackRock? Larry Fink, the co-founder, chairman, and CEO of BlackRock, also the current interim co-chair of the World Economic Forum. He has a close relationship with Donald Trump, as I've reported in the past. They have a 40-year history together because they've both been involved in the Manhattan financial scene in New York City. And in March 2025, it was announced that Trump had consulted with Larry Fink before he was allowed to secure the purchase of 2 ports in the Panama Canal for BlackRock. So they clearly have a close relationship here. And with BlackRock's significant investments in companies like Chevron, ExxonMobil, and ConocoPhillips, these are more than likely influencing factors in the U.S. policy towards Venezuela's oil sector. So I think that is something that should be paid attention to. One other point while we're talking about oil and billionaires, as I mentioned here, that Larry Fink is not the only billionaire who's benefiting handsomely from the capture of Maduro and the U.S. occupation of the Venezuelan oil industry. Among the billionaires celebrating the U.S. aggression is Paul Singer, billionaire hedge fund manager whose firm, Elliott Investment Management, has long sought to acquire Citgo Petroleum, the U.S.-based subsidiary of Venezuela's state-owned oil company. In November 2025, U.S. judge approved a $5.9 billion bid by an Elliott affiliate, Amber Energy, to purchase shares in Citgo's parent company through a court-organized auction aimed at satisfying creditors' claims against Venezuela. The sales still require final approval from the U.S. Treasury Department. Citgo's assets include 3 major oil refineries in Louisiana, Texas, and Illinois, pipelines, terminals, and more than 4,000 gas stations across the U.S. So this Paul Singer, via his Elliott Investment Management and Amber Energy, they stand to make quite a bit of money if they do get this deal to go through, which could coincidentally, the U.S. going in there and taking over the oil industry, it's more than likely that he's going to benefit. He's going to stand to benefit to the tune of billions of dollars. He is a major donor to Donald Trump's presidential campaign, as well as the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, also known as AIPAC. So he's a Zionist. He's a Trump supporter. He's donated millions to Trump. And apparently, according to Representative Thomas Massie, Singer has already spent more than $1 million in an attempt to defeat him in his upcoming re-election bid, as Thomas Massie tweeted. According to Grok, Paul Singer, globalist Republican mega donor who's already spent $1 million to defeat me in the next election, stands to make billions of dollars on his distressed Citgo investment now that this administration has taken over Venezuela. So the point is, there are clearly people who stand to benefit in the oil industry related to Trump's action. But what is the other piece of the puzzle that a lot of people are missing? That is the Technocracy Connection. And so I'm not going to read this entire article here. If you've read my book, How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State, which I'll show you more about in a minute, you've heard me already go over this history. Or if you've watched any of my videos, I have an entire section on the website. If you scroll to theconsciousresistance.com and look at our categories here, we have an entire section of technocracy. Just go to theconsciousresistance.com/technocracy. And you can find all of the reports I've done for the last 5 or 6 years about technocracy, outlining its origins, outlining its connections to Peter Thiel, to Donald Trump, to Elon Musk, digital IDs, digital currencies. I mean, on and on and on. And not just talking about the problems of it, but what can actually be done to disrupt it. So if you're just getting caught up, there's a lot to catch up to. But in short, in the early 20th century, there was a movement known as technocracy. It was popular in the United States and Canada, parts of Europe, but mainly in North America. And they essentially said that politics was not working, that the business class had failed to build a better world. And instead, we needed non-businessmen, non-politicians to come in and to take over. You needed technocrats. These would be the technical experts who focused on technology-focused solutions. Now, of course, early 20th century, we're talking about 1920s, 30s, and 40s. Computers as we know them today are not around, but people were definitely aware that there was machines and that machines were going to change society. Machines had already started to change farming and agriculture. They were changing other areas of our life. And people like this, including a man named Howard Scott, who was a writer and an engineer who founded what was known as the Technical Alliance in New York City in 1919, they believed, as I said, that business owners lack the necessary skills and data to reform their industries, and that control of government and society should be handed over to engineers and scientists, the technocrats. And in 1932, Howard Scott partnered with another guy named Walter Rottenstraat to establish the Committee on Technocracy at Columbia University. A lot of this stuff goes back to Columbia University, especially the Trilateral Commission, which was founded by David Rockefeller and Zbigniew Brzezinski and Henry Kissinger and others, which was definitely a modern version in the 1970s of the technocratic movement. Zbigniew Brzezinski referred to it as the technotronic era, but it all goes back to Columbia University. So that's just another kind of interesting point. Eventually, it would become, Scott would form Technocracy Incorporated, and Technocracy Incorporated was very active in the late 1930s and 1940s. They published journals, they held rallies and parades and things like that. And in 1938, Technocracy Incorporated released a publication where they outlined their vision for technocracy and their plan for merging North America and parts of Central America into a single continental unit, which they called the Technate. And so they have this long explanation. I'm not going to read the whole thing except for this important point. The Technate will encompass the entire American continent from Panama to the North Pole, because the natural resources and the natural boundary of this area make it an independent, self-sustaining geographical unit. In 1940, map from Technocracy Inc., which is right here. You can see at the bottom here, Technate of America. This is how they imagined it. Of course, they had Hawaii all the way here in the left. They had Alaska, what we know as the United States and Canada, all of it encompassed into one thing, including Mexico, going into Central America, the Bahamas, the Caribbean, and wouldn't you know it, all the way down to eastern parts of Colombia and Venezuela. And if you look at the top, you also got Greenland. Now, this starts to make sense when you think about what's been happening lately and how the technocrats imagined that there would be control of this entire region. Especially when you put this into context that Trump has continued to threaten military action in Colombia, again, related to alleged drug trafficking, which there is drug trafficking going on in Colombia. It makes a little more sense there, but still, the U.S. has no business going over there. Nevertheless, Trump, as you see on the technocrats map at the bottom of your screen, it includes parts of Colombia in their plan. So I think that could be, one of the reasons why. But they weren't just focused on Central and South America. As I said, they were talking about Greenland. In a July 1940 issue of Technocracy magazine, Howard Scott on Technocracy and Technocracy Inc. explicitly advocated for the acquisition of Greenland. They said the government of the United States should take immediate action to acquire these territories and others, such as Greenland and the Galapagos Islands. The acquisition of these territories should be a mandatory part of the program of the Continental Defense for immediate achievement, either by purchase, negotiation, or the force of arms. The original technocrats' plan for taking control of Greenland has repeatedly been echoed by Trump since taking office. You guys have heard it if you've been paying attention anywhere, even before this week, but especially this last week after the Venezuela situation. Now Trump is looking at Greenland again, and they're saying they're going to take it by force. They're going to buy people out. Here you go. On Monday, Trump's top advisor, Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller, claimed that Greenland belonged to the United States and that the U.S. military could seize the semi-autonomous Danish territory. Quote, "Nobody's going to fight the U.S. military over the future of Greenland. We live in a world, in the real world, Jake," talking to CNN's Jake Tapper, "that is governed by strength, that is governed by force, that is governed by power. These are the iron laws of the world since the beginning of time." And you know what? In some ways, he's not wrong. But as I said at the beginning of the show, the fact that the U.S. government is just openly acknowledging this and admitting it, I think it's a big sign that we are at a point now where they're not even trying to keep the mask on. They're not even trying to pretend that they actually care about it. International law, and again, I have problems with the United Nations. I have problems with the International Criminal Court, all these different globalist institutions. I'm not saying we should support them. I'm saying that the U.S. government is making it clear that they're not even going to pretend to care about these institutions. They're not even going to pretend to go along with these institutions. They basically are just going to do whatever the heck they want because might is right, and that's what they believe. And I guess on one hand you could argue, well, the mask is off and that's better off that we know that these people just act by, what did he call it, the iron law of the world. But surprise, surprise, when the mask comes off, it still doesn't feel any better. On Tuesday, Trump White House reiterated this potential for military action against Greenland, saying the president and his team are discussing a range of options to pursue this important foreign policy goal. And of course, utilizing the U.S. military is always an option at the commander-in-chief's disposal. And then by Thursday, Trump is saying he might pay Greenlanders $10,000 to $100,000 per person to convince them to secede from Denmark and join the U.S. government, the United States, which is just, again, this is literally fulfilling the plan for the technocracy, the technate of America. And the technocrats were not the only people to have plans of dividing the world up into sectors. This is something that has been common in so-called conspiracy lore and research for years, talking about the North American Union, the South American Union, the African Union, the European Union, the Club of Rome. They even had maps where they broke the world off into different sectors. But the technocrats are in control now. This is why it matters. And I'm going to get back to this in a moment, because I had somebody on YouTube tell me that this doesn't matter, that I'm just picking up some old 100-year-old movement that really has no power, no influence, and acting as if it's relevant to today. Well, I think it is relevant to today. And why is that? Well, let's just look at another example here. On January 3rd, Katie Miller, the wife of Stephen Miller, yes, the psycho who I just mentioned, who said that we're going to do whatever we want, nobody's going to fight the United States. His wife posted a meme of Greenland overlaid in American flag colors with a single word, soon. Notably, Katie Miller was an advisor and spokesperson for Elon Musk's Doge, and then she was an employee of Elon directly, and then she started a podcast. So this lady, let me go ahead and just pull up the tweet. Shortly after, like 2 days after, or literally just the same day, because January 3rd was the morning of the Venezuelan thing. So later that day, this lady posts, soon. Here she is, saying Greenland, this is going to be America's soon, American flag. And again, as I've already pointed out, that is part of the technocrats' plan. And she worked with Elon Musk. The fact that she worked with Elon Musk and is connected to Elon Musk is significant, because Elon Musk's grandfather, Joshua Hazelman, was a research director for Technocracy Incorporated of Canada and a national chairman of the Social Credit Party. Musk is simply following in his grandfather's footsteps, as he and the numerous technocrats surrounding Trump worked to bring about the original vision of the American technate. Now, if you need further proof of this, for one, as I said, go to the technocracy section on our website. You could start with this report that I did at the end of 2025. It's only like 15 minutes long. Trump solidified relationship with technocrats in 2025. Look at all these articles that I covered in 2025. Just numerous examples of Donald Trump and his connection to the technocratic class, including Mark Zuckerberg, David Sachs, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Howard Lutnick, Peter Thiel, Alex Karp, and so on and so on. And as I say here, MAGA, which largely believes it's the resistance to the globalist elite, has capitulated, and it continues to make excuses as Trump stacks his administration with technocrats, including members and attendees of the Bilderberg Group, the World Economic Forum, and the World Economic Forum's Young Global Leaders program. I outline this in different articles, including Meet the Peter Thiel Acolytes in Donald Trump's second administration, Meet the Man whose philosophy has influenced Peter Thiel and the technocrats, and Welcome to the Palantir World Order. These are all articles I wrote in 2025 that I think are like a series that build upon each other, and I encourage you guys to go check them out. If you really want to know who is influencing the thinking of Peter Thiel, of J.D. Vance, and through that, Donald Trump, well, it's these technocrats that are part of all those organizations I just mentioned. And one example that I'll give you is a man named Michael Kratsios. Michael Kratsios is one of a dozen of the Peter Thiel acolytes in the second Trump administration. He is currently serving as the science advisor to the president and director of the White House's Office of Science and Technology. He served in a similar role during Trump's first administration. He used to work for Peter Thiel's funds, Thiel Capital and Clarion Capital. In June of this past year, 2025, Michael Kratsios was at the Bilderberg meeting. So you have a guy who worked with Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel happens to be a steering committee member of the Bilderberg Group, along with his co-founder of Palantir, Alex Karp. Trump is taking advice from these people, working with these people. Palantir is getting all kinds of government contracts. And here you can see the Bilderberg 2025 meeting attendance list. And there's Michael Kratsios, director of White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, a guy funded by Peter Thiel, working for Peter Thiel, going to see his old boss, who's the steering committee of the Bilderberg meeting, and nobody, for the most part, in independent alternative media, says a freaking peep. Nobody's talking about it. At the same time, Kratsios is apparently part of Trump's efforts to limit how states can regulate artificial intelligence. Just last week, Michael Kratsios was at the 2026 Consumer Electronics Show, and he said that the White House is preparing a legislative proposal to establish a national AI framework and prevent what he described as market fragmentation caused by inconsistent state rules. Translation, they don't want states to be able to regulate AI. Guess who also doesn't want that? Peter Thiel, David Sachs, the so-called crypto and AI czar, Howard Lutnick, all the people in Trump's administration, including his own family members, who stand to benefit from keeping people from slowing down or limiting AI. In fact, Peter Thiel's out there saying that the people who are the real Antichrist are the people who would seek to slow down the rollout of AI, that those are the people we should be afraid of. And as I end here, there is simply no denying that Donald Trump is helping usher in the technocratic state, backed by the likes of Peter Thiel, goons, Palantir goons like Peter Thiel and Alex Karp, Zionists and modern-day technocrats such as Elon Musk, David Sachs, and Howard Lutnick. What we are witnessing with Venezuela and Greenland is one more step in the completion of the American technate, and one step closer to the vision of a global government. That is my new article, guys. You can find it at The Last American Vagabond. It is simply called The Venezuela Technocracy Connection. It'll be in the show notes. I highly encourage you to read that. As I mentioned as well, I'll put the link to our technocracy section on the website, where I've got dozens and dozens of interviews and podcasts and reports breaking down technocracy and how it's connected to Donald Trump's current administration and how he is serving in this role to help roll it out. Despite playing this role of being anti-globalist, sure, it's a shift away from the New World Order that has been promoted from the Bushes and others, but it is a shift to a different type of world order. And I don't think that's the world order that values individual liberty, bodily autonomy, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, or any of those things. As we're seeing under Donald Trump's administration, it is an administration that values authoritarianism and that values chaos and does not seek to empower the individuals. And so many people, I mean, I'm trying not to even get into things going on in Minnesota and elsewhere, but all I can say is that this last week I've seen a lot of people bootlicking. First with Venezuela, making excuses, and people who claim to be anarchists, freedom-minded people, cheering it on, saying, well, Maduro is a bad guy, or Venezuelans are celebrating it as if that means that it's a good thing, or as if they couldn't be propagandized. And seeing people cheering on what's going on with ICE and other places, they are building this technocratic surveillance police state, my friends, and you need to wake up to it because it's staring you in the face and there's nothing else to do but wake up to it or accept it. Because as it rolls out and as the authoritarianism gets worse, there's going to be digital IDs, there's going to be a biometrics, and guess who's already walking around the United States scanning people's faces with their phones? ICE, as well as other government agencies. We need to wake up, guys. Venezuela is just one piece of this puzzle. The U.S. government's also threatening Iran. They're saying, they might strike on land here in Mexico where I'm at, and that's freaking out some people. Of course, they're also talking about Greenland, talking about Colombia. The empire is out in the open, and every empire makes the mistake of overextending itself and then eventually collapsing. I'm not saying the U.S. government's anywhere near collapse or it's going to collapse this year, next year. I don't know any of those things. All I know is they are following the historical pattern of all empires by overextending themselves, and they're not even pretending that they're trying to go after countries now to spread democracy. It's just about resources, it's about violence, it's about control, and it's about domination. So that's what they're about. If you guys want to thrive in the face of this, I highly, highly, highly encourage you guys to pick up my book for free. Of course, you can buy a physical copy, but you can download it for free at theconsciousresistance.com/how-to. I wrote this book in late 2019, published January 31st, 2020. I updated it and published December 2022. This is called How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State. This gives you ideas on how to opt out of everything that we're facing right now. I don't claim to have all the answers, but I know I have some of the answers. And the truth is, my friends, you have to let go of the lives that they've sold to you. You have to realize that if you're going to stay free, you might not be able to travel. You might have to change your job. You might have to change your relationships. You might have to quit the banks. You might have to change your lifestyle and your habits. And I know that's extreme for some of you, but I don't see another way out of it. I think if you want to thrive in the face of this, you're not going to win by taking these people head on. I know some people like Derrick, exit and build. Opting out is just delaying the inevitable. They're going to come kill you. I don't agree. I think that this is the way we build the parallel systems that might be able to, and I believe will, thrive and survive outside of what they're building. Because if you do nothing but keep voting or even protesting, which I support the right to protest and get your voice heard. But if you think that's going to fix it, or the courts are going to save you, or that Trump's going to save you, or that waiting for the next election is going to save you, or waiting for Thomas Massey to run for president, or anything like this, you are going to be caught into this system. If you do nothing but wait for somebody else to save you, whether that's your chosen religious figure, QAnon, or anything else like that, you are going to find yourself trapped in this technocratic state. You need to pull yourself out of it as soon as possible and join those of us who are part of this movement to exit and build. And in fact, if you want to learn more about exit and build, go to theconsciousresistance.com/EXB, and it'll take you to this page that I did back in 2024, 2025, the 45-day exit and build challenge. It's completely free. There's no cost to it. You can go through 7 weeks. I'm still getting emails of this, of people who are trying this out and are slowly implementing changes in their lives in the areas of education, their mindset and their habits, land, technology, money, food. All of these areas matter as we see the technocratic state growing by day. So I encourage you guys to check that out. Again, theconsciousresistance.com/EXB, theconsciousresistance.com/how-to, and go to my new article, Venezuela and Technocracy. All those links will be included in the show notes. And then just one final time before I wrap up here, let me just show you the comment that I was talking about, where somebody is telling me that I'm just off my rocker by thinking that technocracy has any relevance to today. I think anybody saying that hasn't followed my work, first of all, but also isn't paying attention to everything that I've outlined here in this report. Just seeing that it's the bigger picture. So this guy here says it's not complicated. It's about oil, 100% and other natural resources. I don't deny that, but he says here, you had it right when you said it was about oil. The claims around the technocracy are baseless. Just because some old plan for American technocracy included a power grab across the continent doesn't mean this plan is that they're following. It's possible to have similar levels of greed with a completely different plan. I'd suggest you pay more attention to Trump's repeated references to the Monroe Doctrine. I talked about that. I think that is part of this, but you can't deny that. You can't deny anything, about the technocracy movement if you actually are paying attention to all the people that I pointed out and all the people that are in Trump's administration who are a part of this. So, you can deny it if you like, but it doesn't help. This is the plan they're doing. They're building the Tech Native American, the North American Technate. And I advise you to learn about their history, learn who the modern technocrats are, and be prepared for what's coming and opt out where and when you can. Guys, my website is theconsciousresistance.com. Please subscribe to our email list here, especially if you happen to be seeing this on Facebook. I was blocked off Facebook for 30 days. I just got back in somehow, but it'll probably happen again. And if you don't follow me, you miss a lot of content. You miss my new book, From the Pyramid of Power, my new memoir, all my new interviews and my new important reports. Go to theconsciousresistance.com, sign up for my email list, and you will be the one to get the latest content. So check it out, guys. I appreciate everybody who's tuned in today. Thank you so much. Stay tuned for more reports as always. And until next time, remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. Peace, my friends.
Since 2012, the Conscious Resistance Network has been an independent media organization focused on empowering individuals through education, philosophy, health, and community organizing. We work to create a world where corporate and state power do not rule over the lives of free human beings. Our motto is leading by example and helping others in their pursuit of freedom. Visit theconsciousresistance.com to find our articles, documentaries, interviews, podcasts, books, and more. Remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free.